We will be spending the next 75 minutes together talking about making decisions, probably from a slightly different perspective you might expect. We will not be talking about how we actually improve our decision skills in any significant way. We will not be talking about tools that we can use. Instead, we're going to be spending the next 75 minutes talking about how we screw up. So view this afternoon as one big decision therapy session, where if we do our job right, when we walk out of here at coffee break in an hour and a half, we're going to have a better sense of the particular traps that afflict us when we make decisions. Now, to say that we're not perfect decision makers, that in and of itself is not a particularly compelling scientific statement. We know that we have bounded rationality, we have finite computing power between the ears, and we deal with that bounded rationality by using rules of thumb or heuristics in making decisions every day. Example of a rule of thumb can be something as simple as, in deciding on whether or not to bring an umbrella here today, you looked at the sky, and a rule of thumb you use is, if sky is grayer than some shade of gray, bring umbrella. If sky is less gray than some shade of gray, don't bring umbrella. Now, we don't sit down and draw a little decision tree like that, but that's how we fundamentally process information. And overall, the use of rules of thumb leads to pretty good quality decisions. However, the use of rules of thumb leads to systematic and predictable biases. And that's what I want to be talking about to you guys this afternoon, the systematic ways in which we tend to fall prey to decision traps. I like to say it's fine to be wrong. It's not fine to always be wrong in the same direction or to be biased. And what we're going to be talking about today are some of the ways in which we tend to always be wrong in the same direction, in making personal decisions as well as in making money decisions. That's going to be particularly relevant to you guys. So today you're going to be getting the 75-minute version, the cocktail party version of what is normally a semester-long class at the Wharton School. Clearly you guys are bright, but not that bright. We're not going to be able to cover the whole thing. But the stuff we'll be talking about, my PhD advisor when I did my PhD at UBC 20 years ago is now at Princeton University. His name is Daniel Kahneman. He won the Nobel Prize in economics 2 years ago for the stuff we're going to be talking about today. He was the first psychologist in the history of the Nobel to win a Nobel in economics, and it's all about how, left to our own devices, not only are we not perfectly right, but we are predictably wrong in predictable ways. So that's what we want to be talking about today, is the ways in which we tend to be wrong always in the same direction or in the same way. You might want to flip the screen to my laptop. That would be wonderful. Great. Okay, this here, cool. There's a number of different steps to any decision. Step one of any decision problem, I would argue, and by far the ugly stepchild of decision making, is problem framing. Think of a picture frame or a window frame. It's about deciding what needs to be decided. And time again, most of us as, quote, action people have such a bias towards action. We have such a tendency to want to jump into solution mode right away that we tend to take problems as they're given to us. We don't reframe them. We go solve the problem as it's given to us. And time again, we realize we solved the wrong problem. 2 weeks later, we got to do it again. Most of us don't take or spend the time actually zooming back out from the problem and saying, am I really asking the right question here? It's very interesting. My MBA class where I teach this, I set them up at the beginning of the semester to walk in with a current problem that they're facing, a decision problem they're facing in their lives, either a work problem or a personal problem, and walk in with a one-page description. Then we spend quite a bit of time talking about problem framing, and then the exercise I do with them is, assume that the problem that you walked into class with is in fact not the real problem. Assume that the problem that you walked in with is in fact a symptom of some more fundamental problem. What more fundamental problem might your problem be in fact a symptom of? And I've been keeping track over the last 5 years, nearly 70% of the time people walk away with a different problem definition that they walked in with. Now, the key is we tend not to suspend disbelief. We tend to say, okay, that's the problem and go with that. When you allow yourself to all of a sudden say, you know what, maybe my problem is in fact just a symptom. What else might it be? When you go through that exercise, you find that more, at least my little empirical base on my students, 70% of the time they walk out with a different problem definition, obviously, let alone a different solution. So we're going to spend the large part of this afternoon together talking about problem framing, because that's the part that comes back to bite us in the butt time and time again. All right, problem framing, step one. Step two, gathering intelligence. And just like there's a variety of different decision traps at the problem framing stage, there's also a variety of different decision traps at the intelligence gathering stage. Step three, coming to conclusions. Probably fewer cognitive traps at this stage of the process, because that tends to be where we use tools to help us out. The stuff that we teach our MBA students, or the stuff that lives on my laptop, tends to be coming to conclusions types of tools. There's no tools out there to help me problem frame. There's very few tools out there to help me gather the right intelligence. There's tons of tools out there that takes information, puts it into the meat grinder, turns the crank, and out comes some kind of a decision sausage. So because that tends to be where we take the power out of our own hands and let the tool do the thinking for us, there's fewer cognitive traps at this stage of the process. That said, there are significant pathologies when we try to come to conclusions in groups. And finally, learning from experience, excuse me, or the lack thereof. I'd suggest ugly stepchild number 2. During the course of the next hour, I'm going to be giving you guys a whole bunch of little decision exercises where I'm setting you up to fail. We'll take it with a grain of salt. We'll learn more from failure than success, and then we'll debrief on what went on. If experience is any indicator, I've done this a lot, on these exercises, you will perform no better, but no worse, than 17-year-old Psychology 101 students doing the same exercises. So while it's comforting to know that you'll perform no worse than your 17-year-olds, you'll say, Roch, you mean to tell me that my 17-year-old is as good a decision maker as I am? Well, we hope we have higher emotional intelligence than they do, but in terms of these straight cognitive tasks, we are no better than they are. For a couple of reasons. One, these biases that I'll talk about are the result of heuristics or rules of thumb that are hardwired at a very young age. A 17-year-old will make the same umbrella decision we do. They may have a different tolerance for getting wet than we do, but at the end of the day, it's the same kind of cognitive if-then process. So hardwired nature of these rules of thumb means that we don't improve all that much. But the other reason why we don't outperform 17-year-olds is that we don't learn from past decision experience nearly as much as we think we do. How many people in this room could say, legitimately, that after every significant resource commitment or decision that your organization makes, regardless of the outcome, that after you do it, you actually are very systematic about doing a post-mortem or a debrief on your decision? How systematic are you guys at debriefing past decisions? People say, Roch, I barely have time to make decisions about tomorrow. How do you expect me to have time to make decisions about yesterday? And that may be true. But the price we pay for being sloppy in our learning from past feedback is that we learn, but we learn in a very skewed way. We will tend to debrief failures way more than successes, for example, under the belief that if something was successful, I did everything right. Sometimes you do everything wrong, but get lucky. And you never find that out if you don't debrief successes as well. You learn, but you learn from feedback from subordinates who may filter the feedback because they have their own agendas. We end up learning, but we learn in a very asymmetric way. And as a result, our decision skills don't improve all that much. And keep the following in mind, and the literature on this is absolutely crushing. Expertise does not immunize us from the traps we're going to be talking about this afternoon. Today we're going to be doing little decision vignettes in the context of everyday decisions, but keep the following in mind. I could be giving you similar vignettes in how you manage people's money. It'd be the same story. Because frankly, to me, expertise has to do with the quality of your database. If you went to medical school and I didn't, it's not that you fundamentally think differently from me. It's that you're going to medical school has given you a better medical database between the ears than I do. But at the end of the day, even as a doctor, you make the same umbrella decision I would do. So expertise has to do with the quality of your database. These traps are the result of, the quality of our processor, if you like. So you might be an expert at something, but if you still have your better database, but you still have the same type of processor I do, and these are hardwired very young, you will still perform this, exhibit the same types of mistakes. So expertise does not immunize from these traps. Expertise is a database story. This is much more hardwired than that. So think of today as being in the decision equivalent of these well-known optical illusions. You guys have all seen those. Top left, the vertical line seems longer than the horizontal one, yet they're exactly the same line, same length. Bottom left, the dot is exactly in the middle, yet somehow it seems to be on the left-hand side. Top right, the lines are exactly the same length, yet the top one looks longer. Bottom right, the lines are perfectly parallel. We don't consciously choose to fall prey to these visual illusions. The way our visual cortex is wired tricks us into thinking otherwise. So just like there's these involuntary optical illusions,